Today we have with us John Fincher. John, thank you so much for joining us today.
A pleasure to be here, Mark.
So John is an entrepreneur who sold his company and now is also a business broker who helps other business owners sell theirs.
That's correct, yeah.
So I'd love to learn about how you sold your company and some of the lessons that you learned there and how you apply them to helping other people sell theirs.
You bet. First, I'd like to give you a little background, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an entrepreneur from the get-go. I graduated from UT. I had a degree in radio, television, film, 2 years of pre-med. So I'm a left brain, right brain, which I don't know if that's a blessing or a curse. But I went back to Houston. I didn't want to move to L.A. and get in the film world. And so I started a business in Houston. It was a construction business. And I learned how to manage arms and legs. Had about 25 employees, and we were remodeling supermarkets across Texas. And second business, I put a suit back on. I started an advertising marketing firm, and I learned sales and marketing. Third business, I steal that line from Zig Ziglar. He says it only took him 10 years to become an overnight success. Mine was 15. The third business took off like a rocket. We did legal services, mostly litigation support. We started in downtown Houston, and that's what got me to Austin. My partner said, choose your city. He made some suggestions like Chicago and L.A. and Philly and large legal markets. And I didn't want to move out of the great state of Texas, being born and raised here. So I said, how about Austin? And that's what got me back to Austin. That business went 0 to $50 million in sales in 5 years. We opened 21 cities across the U.S. and rolled them all up and sold to a Fortune 500 company. You asked, what did we do right on that merger? We hired a CFO about 2 years prior to putting it on the market, and he really was good financially. So we had audited financials that held up in due diligence, really, really important, especially when you're selling to a public company. And he guided us through the process.
Got it. So 2 years prior to exit, you bring on the CFO. Is that when you were thinking about selling the company? Is that why you brought him on?
We brought him on. We actually brought him on before we thought about selling the company, just to make sure we were cleaning up our financials and doing everything right. When you have multiple cities, there's so much taxation, laws, and we kind of got punished early on because we weren't aware of all of them. Mm-hmm. And so he really helped clean things up. Yeah.
Got it. What was the impetus for selling the company?
My partner, this is going to be kind of funny, but he had this recurring nightmare, I guess. It was his wife chasing him through the house with one of those old wooden rolling pins saying, you should have sold. Because things had gone really rapid and straight up, all the things you want to do when you sell. And I guess it was just fear on his part, like it won't last forever, or the laws will change, or litigation will stop, or, whatever. We did start a scanning division in about our 4th year into the business. Back then it was all copies, if you can imagine that, for a huge litigation, case. It's just boxes and boxes and boxes. And now, of course, they all get scanned, which makes more sense.
What were some of the things that you learned from that transaction?
I can think of one of our partners, one of our shareholders, had a vacation plan for Italy, and that's where he was during the countdown to the close, and even during the close. And I can't tell you how many business owners I've worked with who don't change their vacation plans because we're in the middle of a deal. And I'm like, please, don't do that. So we were faxing, documents back and forth across the pond at all hours to get his signature on things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that you can take away from that experience directly selling your company that you apply to helping other business owners sell theirs?
Well, I think it's really important that they position the company for sale. One of the most important things is to have a great team. If the entrepreneur is going to leave that company, then there has to be knowledge how to run that company without the entrepreneur. And so many of them are, hands-on, occasionally we run into the control freak that hasn't delegated anything. That makes it very difficult to sell.
How do you position a company for selling besides trying to delegate out the roles and responsibilities from just a couple founders or managers?
I think it's important that they look at the overall operations of the company. Do they have good operating procedures and things well documented to where a new owner could come in and look at the model for running that business and figure it out? The team, like I mentioned, is very, very important. The financials, you want to have your financial house in order, and you want to have your legal house in order. We run into issues where they just haven't documented properly over the years
for the corporation. How soon should that process typically start?
Anywhere from 1 to 5 years out.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. And is
probably the earlier the better.
Is there one area that you think is more important than another? Like you brought in a CFO, and that seemed to work out really well for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Would you recommend that for other companies, or is there someone else that you think is more important as kind of like an initial step in preparing a company for sale?
Well, I would say the management team is paramount. How well versed are they on the company and all the aspects of the company? Can they run it without the owner? I always ask owners, when's the last time you went on vacation? And then I want to know how long were you on vacation. Mm-hmm. And if they tell me I was gone all summer, it's like, great, you have a good team in place.
That's an interesting litmus test.
Yeah.
So going back to your last company, it sounded like the reason to sell is pretty clear. It's this recurring nightmare. What are some of the main reasons you see business owners today sell their companies?
That's a really good question. I put business sellers in 2 categories, Mark. I have the want-tos and the have-tos. And the have-tos are what I call the 5 bad Ds: death, divorce, disease, downturn, disgruntlement. And they don't have a choice. Mm-hmm. I mean, I sold a business recently. The guy had possibly a terminal disease and had to get it sold, which we were successful, and it's going to be good for him, and he can spend time with his family. The others, the want-tos, they may be serial entrepreneurs that grow and sell, and they just stair-step up, and those are great sellers and great buyers too. And then there's the baby boomers. I am one, so I know that market well. It's estimated there's $10 trillion of private wealth in baby boomer businesses across the U.S. So that's a lot of money that needs to change hands if they don't have family succession. That's what we're there for.
So those are some of the reasons why companies sell. But in your opinion, what do you think are some of the reasons that companies should sell?
Well, I think it depends on the entrepreneur themselves. Where are they in life, and are they bored? Do they want to do something else? Do they want to diversify their portfolio? Because normally all their assets are in that business. Their financial net worth is really tied up in that business. So by selling, they can diversify a portfolio.
What are the common mistakes that you see sellers typically make?
Let me count the ways. We talked about positioning the business for sale and really not being ready when they have to sell. And so those have-tos, sometimes aren't ready, but they have to sell. I see messy financials quite often when we're looking at value on the front end. We want to crunch numbers on 3 to 5 years of tax returns and year-ending P&Ls and balance sheets, and sometimes they're just a mess.
Do you have any stories that you can share that kind of illuminate some of these lessons that you've learned?
Oh, I think of one in particular. We were able to sell, but in due diligence, the inventory just wasn't holding up at all. And I always say there's 3 methods of inventory accounting. Last in, first out, and then whatever I feel like. And this one was running on the whatever I feel like, which was not good.
Got it.
Yeah, the earnings were way overstated because of the way they were treating inventory. So took about $1 million, hit on the sale, but it was totally curable, but had to be discovered in due diligence.
Yeah. What are some of the reasons why deals maybe don't go through?
Again, let me count the ways. One I can think of is that the entrepreneur takes their eye off the ball after we've engaged and we've done all the heavy lifting to get the business to the market, and for whatever reason the business starts trending the wrong way and makes it very difficult to sell if it's not going up and going down. So that would be one of the things I've seen. Sometimes sellers aren't really committed to the process. They think they are. On a larger deal, I'm going to have a walkaway fee just in case that happens, where we get the buyer and we've got the perfect deal and the seller just decides, you know what, I don't want to sell.
How often does that happen?
Not very often, but it's painful when it does.
Yeah. And what are some of the reasons why they walk away?
I guess they just haven't planned their future properly. I mean, everything's tied around that business for them, and they can't pull away.
That's really interesting. Last week we brought on a investment banker who mentioned that business owners don't actually want to sell their business.
That's interesting perspective. I'd say some of them, that's true. Some of them really do because they're burned out and they really want to sell.
He offered a solution, which is taking some chips off the table and allowing the business owner to still have some level of involvement post-acquisition.
Yeah.
And he found that from a financial perspective, they can sometimes earn more that way than taking kind of a lump sum, up front, and also allows them to stay involved, which kind of fulfills that part that they're
you're talking
want.
about a recap on a company, and two of my associates are FINRA licensed, and they run a branch office for an investment bank and are capable of doing that on larger deals, and we have done that. We have one company that private equity group out of Chicago bought, recapitalized the company. They've expanded into Arizona and some nearby states. They've just rapidly grown that business, and now when they sell again, the entrepreneur will get a bigger piece than he did the first time. It's a wonderful deal.
Yeah. Is that common, or is that kind of niche?
It's a little bit niche. I mean, the stars kind of have to align for that all to happen, but it does happen.
Yeah. And in those circumstances, does the company go out seeking that type of acquirer, or does the acquirer just magically find the company? How do you make the stars align?
Yeah, sometimes sellers will come to us telling us they've been approached by someone, a strategic that's really looking for that kind of a deal. Usually it's the private equity group that's going to recap them. We've sold deals like that where we represented them and even got them a better deal than they were offered on the front end.
And how would you do that?
They don't know that we're not at market, and we may be at market, so it's competitive.
Yeah.
Makes them sharpen their pencils.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about like stock sales versus asset sales. Like, what do sellers need to know going into a transaction as to which one is right for them?
Usually, they need a good attorney, a good M&A attorney, to determine that. If there's some compelling reasons to sell stock, but as you know, attorneys are going to always advise the buyers not to buy stock because they're buying the liabilities along with it. But sometimes there's very compelling reasons to do that. If there's government contracts, it would be a mess to transfer without the entity remaining the same. That can be a reason to do a stock sale. Sometimes it's a taxation issue for the seller, where they may be a C corp and they're gonna have a little bit of double taxation on the deal if they don't sell the stock.
For the companies that you represent, what's the approximate split of stock versus asset sales?
Well, I'm not a licensed broker-dealer. I don't hold a license, so I sell asset deals. If we have a stock sale, that will be assigned to the broker-dealer.
Got it.
Yeah.
What general advice do you have to companies thinking of selling their company?
Well, the first thing I would ask them why. Why do you want to sell? And if I don't hear a real compelling reason, they're probably not a seller, because it takes a highly motivated seller, a highly motivated buyer to get to the close.
And how does one prepare for selling? So business owner says, I'm interested in selling my company. What's the next step?
Well, once I find out they really are interested in selling their company and why, I also want to know, what are you going to do when you sell your company? Because, again, they need to have a good reason. I've had examples of people that have sold their companies and done great, but some of them ended up starting something else just because they get bored.
What are some examples of when a company tries to sell, they're ready for it, but the deal just doesn't go through for whatever odd reason? What are some of those reasons?
Yeah. Downturn, where they took their eye off the ball. I actually had one that lost about 50% of the gross margin in the third quarter, and we had the buyer lined up. We had the financing lined up. It was ready to go,
Wow.
and it became unsellable overnight.
How long is typically the due diligence process?
Due diligence can run anywhere from 30 to 90 days, depending on how complex the business is. We want to have a timeline for doing due diligence so the deal keeps moving. We always say that time's the enemy of a deal, and it truly is.
Is there anything that the business owner can do during that time period to defend the purchase price of their company, or maybe even increase it?
Generally, on a larger deal, it may be a percentage times EBITDA. And so if they're trailing 12 months, it's going up. That's a good thing for the seller.
Are there some lessons that you've extracted from your experience that apply to some industries and not others, like B2B versus, say, hospitality versus, say, professional services?
Some of the internet sales get a little bit tricky with depending on how many channels they have, and are they on Amazon, and some of those documents can be pretty tricky about how you can transfer the business from one owner to another.
Got it.
That's a legal question.
Yeah. I was just thinking, from a market perspective, as the market changes from peak to trough, are there some businesses that are more ripe for trying to sell than others?
Well, there are cyclical businesses probably need to sell now before we have another downturn. It's really hard to get them to sell now because they've been going up. But we don't know when the next trough's going to hit, but we all know it's going to hit.
Yeah. I've had a couple guests have conflicting opinions on when to sell. Some say that you should sell when things are going great, and some say that you sell when things are going terrible. What's your opinion on that?
I would never sell when things are going terrible, because you don't get the value
Yeah.
unless you've really ridden it up and you're satisfied with the money you've made up to that point.
Yeah. How does one get multiple offers?
That's our job, is
Yeah.
to take it to market and look for multiple buyers and get the right buyers interested.
Mm-hmm.
That gives them a lot of leverage,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the main reason we do that. I call it more of an auction process, where you want the highest bidder, although it might not be the right fit, and
Yeah.
we let the entrepreneur decide that. If they would rather sell cheaper to someone else because they like them better, that's okay too.
What's an ideal scenario?
One owner, 100% shareholder, makes all the decisions.
And then now, what's a realistic scenario?
Multiple shareholders
Yeah.
or multiple people involved in the sale, and even a spouse, can be challenging depending on the spouse.
Yeah. What are some ways that they can navigate multiple shareholders to get everybody on board?
I suggest with multiple shareholders that you really put one shareholder in charge of the process. You can have votes from time to time, but let one really ramrod the deal.
Mm-hmm. And what if that person is the one in charge of running the company? How does that impact their day-to-day operations?
That could.
Yeah.
Probably wouldn't be the best choice. In our example, we let the CFO, take pretty much the charge and direction.
Any other general advice that you'd have to business owners looking to sell potentially in the future?
Begin with the end in mind, as the late Stephen Covey said.
Yeah.
Really think about what you want out of a transaction. Have a great team in place to make it happen, including an M&A attorney that's all they do is M&A work. Don't bring your personal injury lawyer to do your transaction or family member, because there's so many things that, like reps and warranties, that need to be negotiated, right?
Indeed. And just actually, I had a couple other questions. One is, have you seen businesses try to go this on their own? In other words, not try to bring on a broker or a CPA or an attorney, and how has that resulted?
I have seen that, and sometimes you can even see their marketing ads, and it's just hilarious. It's like they really don't know what they're doing, and it's not a realistic sales price or other information in the marketing. Just no one's going to take them seriously. If you hand me a scalpel, I'm not going to do open heart surgery on myself, and I don't think a business owner should necessarily take their business to market.
What's the process that you run companies through that are looking to sell?
The process starts with looking at value on the front end. I want to make sure they're realistic expectation. If I look at value and I think it's somewhere in the $5 million range, and they say I want $10 million, I'm not going to get there, and so I wouldn't take that engagement.
What are the typical size of companies that it makes sense to bring in a business broker?
I would say anywhere from a low of $500,000 up to you name it. There's no cutoff at the top end, but even a $500,000 sale can benefit from having a broker.
On the top end, when does it make sense to bring in an investment banker?
If there's a recap possibility or a stock sale, then by all means, they should have someone that's licensed.
I interviewed an investment banker a week ago, and he mentioned that typically it makes sense when the company's enterprise value is around $20 million because the work involved, the prospects involved, the due diligence involved is just kind of like a different level than for companies typically smaller than that. Is that something you would agree with, or do you have kind of a different opinion?
I'd probably go lower, 10, 10 and above. But,
Got it.
But I understand where he's coming from. Sure.
Got it. Okay. Any last pieces of advice or lessons learned or stories that you'd like to impart with us?
This is a pretty simple one, but just cleaning their house before they tour a buyer. I had about a $20 million company, and we toured a family office that was very interested in buying that business, and there was just junk in the yard, and I really think it turned them off. I mean, there were things that had been there for obviously 15, 20, 30 years rusting and should have been hauled off. I just thought, clean this place up.
You literally mean like physically clean your house?
Physically clean it up. Yeah.
I think that's good advice. I think just in general. John, thank you so much for your time today.
Well, I've enjoyed it. Thank you, Mark.
And where could people go to learn more about you and your brokerage?
Well, our website is corpinvest.com. And then the two associates that have their FINRA license run a branch office for Statesman Corporate Finance, investment banking firm out of Houston, and they run the Austin office.
Awesome.